The great crystal hall stretched out like a frozen ocean under the artificial lights of the council station. Ambassador Hyun-woo sat at the curved table that had been his second home for 3 long months, watching the alien faces around him argue about things they did not understand. The Altarians, with their blue skin and proud voices, spoke loudly about laws and territories. The reptilian Scythans hissed their disapproval at every human proposal. The insect queens from the hive clicked, their sharp mouths in patterns that meant nothing good. Hyun-woo had learned to read their body language over the weeks. He knew when Counselor Vex was about to interrupt him by the way. The Altarian puffed up his chest. He could tell when the Draconian representative was getting angry because his black scales would start to shine under the lights. He understood that the energy beings from Proxima flickered faster when they were annoyed, but none of them had bothered to learn anything about humans today. Was different, though. Today, Hyun-woo was not going to sit quietly while they talked about his people like they were children. Today, he was going to do something that no species had ever done in the 300-year history of the Galactic Council. Was going to leave. The morning session had started like all the others. Counselor Vex had called the meeting to order with his usual speech about galactic unity and peaceful cooperation. Then Ambassador Kell from the Draconian Empire had stood up, with his datapad full of complaints about human activities in what he called disputed space. The human colonies in Sector 7 are illegal. Kell had announced, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. They were established without proper council approval. According to our records, these worlds were claimed by the Draconian Empire 50 years ago. Hyun-woo had felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had heard this argument many times, but today it felt different. Today it felt final. Our people were there first. Hyun-woo had replied, keeping his voice steady. We filed the proper exploration reports, we followed all council procedures, we even sent invitation messages to neighboring systems before we started building. But you did not wait for official approval. Vex had interrupted. The council must review all new settlements, this is law. We waited 2 years for a response. Hyun-woo had said, our messages were ignored. Our requests were put on waiting lists that never moved. Our people needed homes, and we found empty worlds that nobody wanted. The Hive Queen had clicked her mandibles in what Hyun-woo knew was their version of laughter. Empty worlds that are now full of valuable resources. How convenient for the humans, that was when something inside Hyun-woo had broken. For 3 months he had sat in this room listening to these beings talk about his people like they were thieves or children who did not know better. He had watched them dismiss human achievements and ignore human contributions to galactic society. He had smiled politely while they made jokes about how young and inexperienced humanity was, but they were not young or inexperienced anymore. Humanity had been part of galactic civilization for over 50 years. They had built thriving colonies on worlds that other species had written off as worthless. They had developed new technologies that made life better for everyone. They had served as translators and mediators in countless disputes. They had volunteered for dangerous missions that other species refused. And now these same beings wanted to take it all away because humans were too new to deserve what they had earned. Hyun-woo began packing his documents into his black leather case. The sound of papers rustling was loud in the sudden quiet that fell over the hall. The other delegates stopped their arguing and stared at him. "What are you doing?" asked Vex, his blue skin darkening with confusion. "I am leaving." Hyun-woo replied, without looking up from his case. "But we are not finished with today's agenda," protested the Scythan representative. "We still need to discuss the mining rights and the trade agreements, and you can discuss whatever you want." Hyun-woo closed his case with a sharp click. Humanity withdraws from these negotiations. The silence that followed was complete. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the station life support systems. "You cannot just leave," Vex said finally. "This is not how the council works." Hyun-woo stood up slowly and looked around the table at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked confused, some looked angry, a few looked almost afraid. "The council works by making decisions together," he said. "But you have already decided what you want to do with human territory. You have already decided that our claims are not valid. You have already decided that we are too young and too weak to deserve what we have built. That is not true, Kel protested, but his voice sounded uncertain. Is it not? Hyun-woo picked up his case and walked toward the door. For 3 months I have presented evidence that our colonies were established legally. For 3 months I have shown you documents proving our claims. For 3 months I have asked for fair treatment under council law. He stopped at the door and turned back to face them. And for 3 months you have found excuses to ignore everything I have said because you have already made up your minds. The energy being from Proxima flickered rapidly and spoke in its strange musical voice. The council seeks only justice and peace between all species. Justice, Hyun-woo repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is it justice to take worlds that people have spent decades turning into homes? Is it justice to ignore legal claims because you do not like who made them? Is it justice to treat an entire species like children who need your permission to exist? You are being emotional, said the hive. Queen emotion clouds judgment. Hyun-woo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You are right, I am emotional. I am angry that my people work so hard to be good members of this community, only to be treated like unwanted guests. I am frustrated that we follow your rules and respect your laws while you change them whenever it suits you. He paused, and when he spoke again his voice was quieter but somehow more dangerous. But mostly I am disappointed that beings who call themselves civilized cannot see the difference between right and wrong. Wait. Vex stood up from his chair. We can discuss this. We can find a compromise. No. Hyun-woo shook his head. You had 3 months to find a compromise. You had 3 months to listen to reason. You had 3 months to treat humanity with the respect we have earned. He pressed the button to open the door. Instead, you spent 3 months trying to figure out how to take what we built without looking like thieves. The door slid open with a soft whisper. The council has made its position clear, Hyun-woo said. Now humanity will make ours. As he walked through the door, the last thing he heard was Vex calling after him. But what about your colonies? What about your people? Hyun-woo did not turn around. What about them? He called back. You have already decided their fate. The door closed behind him with a final sound. 3 hours later, Hyun-woo was aboard a human transport ship heading back toward Earth. The message he had sent ahead was short and simple, but it would change everything. Negotiations failed. It read, Council refuses to recognize human territorial claims. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was something the human government had hoped never to use. It was their plan for complete withdrawal from Council space. It meant calling home every human diplomat, trader, technician, and peacekeeper. It meant closing every human business and shutting down every human service. It meant going dark and letting the galaxy manage without them as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Hyun-woo looked out at the stars and wondered if the council had any idea what they had just lost. They were about to find out. Back in the crystal hall the remaining delegates sat in stunned silence. Nobody had ever walked out of council negotiations before. In 3 centuries of galactic politics, every dispute had been settled through discussion and compromise. What do we do now? Asked the Scythan representative. Vex stared at the empty chair where Hyun-woo had been sitting. We continue without them, he said, but his voice sounded uncertain. And their colonies? Asked Kel. We will deal with that later. Vex replied. Right now we need to focus on the other business before the council. But as they tried to return to their normal routine, none of them could shake the feeling that something important had just changed. The human had been so quiet, so polite for so long that they had almost forgotten he was there. Now his absence felt like a hole in the room. Within days, similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human diplomats were packing their bags and heading home. Human traders were canceling contracts and closing their businesses. Human technicians were finishing their shifts and not coming back. At first, nobody paid much attention. Humans were such a small part of galactic civilization. What difference could it make if they decided to go home? The answer to that question would become clear soon enough, but For now, the galaxy continued to turn and the Council continued to meet, and the great machinery of interstellar civilization kept running. Nobody noticed that some of the most important parts were missing. Nobody noticed yet. Admiral Kira stood in the command center of Altair Station, watching the holographic display that showed the current state of Council space, and feeling something she had never experienced in her 30-year military career. Fear, not fear of enemy, fleets or alien invasions, but fear of collapse. Fear that the great civilization she had spent her life protecting was falling apart from the inside. The display showed red warning lights scattered across dozens of star systems. Each light represented a crisis that needed immediate attention. Pirate raids, equipment failures, trade disruptions, communication breakdowns, and her fleet was spread so thin that she could barely respond to half of them. "Admiral, we have another emergency signal from Sector 12. Her communications officer announced, "The mining platform at Kepler 619 is reporting total system failure. 40,000 workers are trapped underground." Kira looked at her fleet deployment map. The nearest rescue ships were 3 days away dealing with pirate attacks in Sector 9. "What about local emergency services?" she asked. "Overwhelmed, sir. The rescue equipment requires human maintenance protocols that nobody else understands. The local crews are afraid to use it after what happened at Kepler 442. The disaster at Kepler 442 had sent shockwaves through the mining industry. 17 dead because someone had overridden safety systems they did not understand. Now every mining operation in the galaxy was being extra careful, which meant that when real emergencies happened, nobody knew what to do. "Dispatch the 4th Fleet," Kira ordered, "and send word to Fleet Command that we need more ships. Sir, the 4th Fleet is already handling the refugee crisis at New Cygnus. The agricultural failure there has left 2 million beings without food." Kira closed her eyes and tried to think. The refugee crisis at New Cygnus was another cascade failure. The weather control systems that regulated the planet climate had broken, down without human technicians to maintain them. Crops had failed across 3 continents, and now millions of people needed emergency food supplies. "What about the 7th Fleet?" she asked. "Escorting medical supply convoys in the Outer Rim, sir. The pirate attacks have made those routes too dangerous for unescorted ships." Every solution led to another problem. Every ship she sent to handle one crisis left another crisis undefended. And through it all, the pirates were getting bolder. Captain Razor was having the best month of his criminal career. His combined fleet now numbered over 200 ships and controlled almost a dozen star systems in the Outer Rim. What had started as opportunistic raiding was becoming something much bigger. "Theo, merchants are starting to hire private security," his lieutenant reported. "But most of the security companies were run by humans and they have pulled back to human space." Razor studied the tactical display in his command ship. The Outer Rim stretched across 47 star systems and contained hundreds of mining operations, trading posts, and small colonies. It had always been lightly defended because the human patrol ships had kept the peace through quick response and local knowledge. Now those patrol ships were gone, and the big council fleets were too slow and too few to patrol such a vast area. "What about resistance from the colonies themselves?" Razor asked. "Minimal, sir. Most of the settlements are small and lightly armed. They were built for mining and farming, not fighting. And the human colonies." His lieutenant checked his data pad. "No contact, sir. They have gone completely dark. Their communication networks are encrypted and they are not responding to any signals." Razor nodded. The human settlements in the Outer Rim were different from the others. They were smaller and more spread out, but they had always seemed more organized somehow, more prepared. "Leave them alone for now," he decided. "Focus on the easy targets." It was a decision he would regret. On the Council homeworld, Vex was learning just how much the galactic economy depended on systems he had never thought about. The morning briefing painted a picture of civilization slowly grinding to a halt. "Trade volume is down 40%, his economic advisor reported. "The precision manufacturing that provides components for everything from communicators to life support systems has nearly stopped. Production delays are cascading through every industry." "What about alternative suppliers?" Vex asked. "We are trying, sir." But the human manufacturing techniques were apparently quite advanced. They produced components that were both higher quality and lower cost than anyone else could manage. Other species are trying to fill the gap, but their products are either too expensive or do not work as well. Vex pulled up the economic reports on his personal display. The numbers were staggering. Entire industries were shutting down because they could not get the parts they needed. Transportation networks were failing because the navigation systems needed constant updates that only human programmers understood. Medical facilities were running out of supplies because the distribution networks had been managed by human logistics companies. How did we not notice how much they were doing, he asked. They never made a big show of it, sir. His aide replied. The humans seemed to prefer working behind the scenes. They took jobs that other species found boring or difficult, and they did them very well. Too well, Vex muttered. The irony was becoming clear. The Council had dismissed humanity as too young and inexperienced to be full partners in galactic civilization, but the humans had quietly made themselves indispensable in ways that no one had noticed until they were gone. On the agricultural world of New Eden, Governor Tam stood in his empty grain warehouses and tried to figure out how his planet had gone from feeding millions to facing starvation. In just 6 weeks, the weather control systems are completely down. His agricultural minister reported, without climate regulation, the growing seasons are chaos. Some areas are flooding, while others are in drought. What about manual farming methods? Tam asked. We have tried, sir, but our people have been dependent on automated systems for generations. Nobody remembers how to farm without computer assistance, and the soil itself has been modified by decades of chemical treatments that require precise monitoring. Tam walked to the window that overlooked what had once been the planet's most fertile valley. Now it was a patchwork of brown and flooded fields broken by the occasional green patch where automated systems were still somehow working. Human agricultural consultants, he said. They warned us about overdependence on automation. Yes, sir. They recommended maintaining backup systems and training programs, but the Council said those measures were unnecessary expenses. Now those unnecessary expenses looked like the difference between life and death for 2 million people. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. The Hive Queen Collective was dealing with communication breakdowns that were causing confusion throughout their rigid social structure. The Scythian Republic was struggling with transportation networks that had been designed by human engineers. The energy beings of Proxima were finding that their power distribution systems needed constant adjustments that only human technicians understood. But perhaps the worst crisis was happening in the council chambers themselves. I cannot understand what the draconian delegate is saying. Queen Zara buzzed angrily, her insect wings vibrating with frustration. The translation system keeps giving me words that make no sense. The system is degrading daily, Vex explained. Our technicians are trying to repair it, but they are not human technicians, interrupted General Sarn, his reptilian scales flashing with anger. So they do not understand how the system actually works. The morning session had devolved into chaos as species after species complained about translation errors. Some delegates were bringing their own interpreters, but that only made things worse as different translators gave different versions of the same statements. Perhaps we should contact the humans directly, suggested the energy being from Proxima. Surely they would be willing to help with humanitarian crises. We have tried, Vex replied. All communication channels to human space are blocked. They are not accepting any messages from council representatives. Then send unofficial messages. Queen Zara suggested, use private channels. We have tried that too, yeah. Humans have apparently decided that any contact with council space is forbidden. Their merchant ships refuse to trade with us. Their diplomats will not meet with our representatives. Even their scientists have stopped attending joint research conferences. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. For 50 years, humans had been part of every aspect of galactic civilization. Now they had simply vanished as if they had never existed. What about their colonies in the Outer Rim? Asked General Sarn. Surely they need supplies and support. We have no information, Vex admitted. Our intelligence networks in that region were largely staffed by human agents, and they have all gone dark. As the session continued to fall apart with mistranslations and misunderstandings, Vex found himself thinking about Ambassador Hyun-woo and the quiet dignity with which he had presented his case for 3 months. The human had never raised his voice or made threats. He had simply presented facts and asked for fair treatment, and they had ignored him. Now they were learning what it meant to be ignored in return. In the depths of space between the stars, human ships moved silently through hyperspace, carrying messages and supplies between colonies that the Council had forgotten existed. The humans were not gone. They had simply stopped caring about the Council, and the galaxy was about to learn the difference. 3 weeks had passed since Ambassador Hyun-woo walked out of the Crystal Hall, and Counselor Vex was beginning to understand that something was very wrong. The morning reports that usually took an hour to review were now taking half the day, and none of them made any sense. His office overlooked the main plaza of Council Station, where thousands of beings from dozens of species went about their daily business. The sight had always filled him with pride at the great civilization they had built together, but today the plaza looked different. Today it looked empty in ways he could not quite explain. "Sir, the translation matrix is having problems again," announced his aide Zara, as she floated into the room on her anti-gravity platform. Her tentacles writhed with the stress patterns that meant she was very worried. The morning session had to be delayed because the Hive Queens could not understand what the Scythan delegates were saying. Vex turned away from the window and looked at the datapad she offered him. The screen was filled with error messages in 17 different languages, most of which he could not read. "What about the backup systems?" he asked. "Also failing, sir," Zara replied. "The entire translation network seems to be breaking down piece by piece." Vex frowned and pulled up the maintenance records on his personal console. The translation system was one of the most important parts of Council operations. Without it, the different species could not communicate, and without communication there could be no cooperation. "When was the last time these systems were serviced?" he asked. Zara consulted her own data pad. According to the records, they were maintained daily by the human technical staff. The last entry was 3 weeks and 2 days ago. 3 weeks and 2 days, that was exactly when the humans had left. "Get me Technical Chief Gron," Vex ordered. An hour later, the massive Altarian engineer stood before Vex's desk, his blue skin darker than usual with frustration. Gron was known throughout the station as someone who could fix anything, but today he looked defeated. "The translation systems are beyond my understanding," Gron admitted, his voice rough with embarrassment. "The humans built them using programming languages that none of our species have bothered to learn. They wrote all the documentation in their own scripts, and half of it is in some Earth language called Korean." "Can you not figure it out?" Vex asked. "I have been trying for 3 days. Gron replied. "The code is incredibly complex but also somehow elegant. It is like they built the entire system to think the way organic minds think, rather than the way computers think. Our programmers build systems that follow strict logical rules, but the humans built something that understands context and emotion and cultural meaning." Vex stared at the error messages on his screen. Each one represented a failure of communication between species, a failure that could lead to misunderstandings, and misunderstandings could lead to conflicts. "How long to rebuild the system?" he asked. Gron was quiet for a long moment. "Years," he said finally. "Maybe decades." The humans did not just build a translation program. They built something that actually understands language the way living beings do. To replace it, we would need to understand how they think and how they learn and how they see the galaxy. As Gron left Vex's office, the counselor felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. The translation system was just one problem. What other systems were breaking down without human maintenance? The answer came faster than he expected. On Altair Prime, the massive orbital shipyards that built the Council fleets had ground to a complete halt. Admiral Kira received the report while reviewing the morning fleet status and could not believe what she was reading. All construction has stopped. Her aide reported, the precision welding robots that assemble the hull sections are malfunctioning and nobody knows how to fix them. What about our own technicians? Kira asked. They tried, sir, but the robots were calibrated by human engineers. The settings are incredibly precise and apparently require constant adjustment based on factors that our people do not understand. Kira pulled up the construction records on her holographic display. The shipyards had been running smoothly for decades, producing the great vessels that kept peace throughout the galaxy. She had never thought about who maintained the delicate systems that made it all possible. The humans again, she said. Yes, sir. It appears they were responsible for all the fine detail work that kept the automated systems running. Our people handled the big picture planning and management, but the humans made sure everything actually worked. On the mining world of Kepler 442, the situation was even worse. Foreman Grix stood on the observation deck looking down at the massive excavation that had been carved into the planet surface. For 50 years, the automated mining systems had pulled precious metals from the deep rock, feeding the industries that kept galactic civilization running. Now the excavation was silent. The main control computer crashed yesterday. His assistant reported, we tried to restart it, but the safety protocols will not let us. The system keeps saying that critical maintenance is overdue. Grix pulled up the maintenance logs on his portable console. The records showed that human technicians had been performing weekly calibrations on systems that other species did not even know existed. They had been monitoring radiation levels and adjusting atmospheric processors and maintaining equipment that everyone else took for granted. Override the safety protocols, Grix ordered. Sir, are you sure? The warnings indicate. Just do it. Grix snapped. We cannot afford to shut down production. The explosions that followed could be seen from orbit. 3 mining complexes destroyed in a chain reaction that started when improperly maintained fusion reactors overloaded. The death toll was 17 workers, and the economic damage would take years to repair. Similar disasters were happening across the galaxy, but it took weeks before anyone realized they were all connected. The common factor in every case was the same systems that had been quietly maintained by human technicians were failing without their care. On the trading station, Haven Point merchant Captain Bach was discovering his own problems. His cargo manifest showed delays and shortages across every major trade route. The food shipments from the agricultural worlds are spoiling. His quartermaster reported, the preservation systems that keep products fresh during long-distance transport are breaking down. Get replacement parts, Bach ordered. That is the problem, sir. The replacement parts were manufactured on human colonies, and those colonies are no longer accepting orders from Council space. Bach pulled up the trade network display. On his office wall, the holographic map showed the flow of goods across thousands of star systems. Bright lines connected worlds, showing the movement of everything from raw materials to finished products to luxury items. But now, many of those lines were flickering or going dark entirely. How much of our trade network depends on human worlds? He asked. His quartermaster consulted her datapad. More than we realize, sir. They produce about 30% of our precision manufacturing components. They handle most of the small shipment logistics. They provide the preservation technology that keeps biological products stable during transport. And now those supply lines are cut. We are finding out how much we depended on systems we never thought about. In the outer territories where the big council fleets rarely patrolled, a different kind of problem was emerging. Captain Razor of the Void Reapers had been planning raids for months but had always been cautious. The human patrol ships were small and lightly armed, but they were everywhere and they were fast. Now those ships were gone. Still no sign of human patrols, his scanner operator reported. The trade routes are completely undefended. Razor grinned, showing his sharp teeth. Then it is time to remind the galaxy why they need protection. The first raid was almost too easy. A merchant convoy carrying medical supplies to a remote colony had no escort and no weapons. 3 ships full of valuable cargo taken without a single shot fired. Where are the peacekeepers? The convoy captain had asked over the communication channel. Someone always responds to distress calls, but no one responded. The human ships that had quietly kept the peace in the forgotten corners of the galaxy were gone, and the pirates were quickly learning to take advantage. Word spread fast through the criminal networks. Ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and empty systems began moving toward the trade routes the Void Reapers were, joined by the Bloodclaw Raiders and the Shadow Fleet and dozens of smaller pirate bands. Within days, the Outer Rim was in chaos, back on Council Station. Vex was receiving reports that painted a picture of galactic civilization slowly falling apart, translation systems failing. Construction halted, mining disasters, pirate raids, and through it all, the humans remained silent. Send them another message. He ordered his aide. Tell them we are willing to discuss their territorial claims. The reply came back within hours, a simple, automated response that made Vex's blood run cold. All human diplomatic channels are closed indefinitely. Please direct all communications through standard council procedures. But the standard council procedures required the very translation and communication systems that were breaking down without human maintenance. For the first time in his long career, Vex was learning what it meant to be ignored, and he was beginning to understand that the quiet, efficient humans he had dismissed as unimportant had been the ones holding galactic civilization together. The galaxy was about to get much quieter and much more dangerous. The first battle of the Outer Rim War lasted exactly 17 minutes. Captain Razor had expected easy prey when his combined pirate fleet descended on the human colony of New Busan. What he found instead was a coordinated defense network that turned his raiders into scrap metal with ruthless efficiency. Where did those weapon platforms come from? Razor screamed as his flagship shook under precise laser fire. Intelligence said these colonies were defenseless. His tactical officer's voice was strained with panic. Sir, they're not just defending. 3 human fleets just dropped out of hyperspace behind us. Razor spun to look at his displays. The human ships were smaller than Council dreadnoughts, but they moved with deadly precision. Their weapons were simple, reliable, and devastatingly effective. Retreat, Razor ordered, but it was too late. The human ships had cut off every escape route. The message broadcast across all frequencies was delivered in a calm, professional voice. This is Admiral Boram of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to surrender or be destroyed. Razor had built his reputation on never backing down from a fight. But as he watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by opponents who fought with cold, calculated fury, he realized he was facing something he had never encountered before. Humans who had stopped being peaceful. Within an hour, the Free Fleet ceased to exist. Some ships surrendered, others chose to fight and were quickly destroyed. Captain Razor himself was captured when his flagship's engines were surgically disabled by precision fire. The news of the battle reached the Council homeworld within days, sending shockwaves through the galactic government. The humans have a military? Councillor Vex asked in disbelief, reading the battle reports. Apparently so, his aide replied. Our intelligence services never detected it because they kept their fleets disguised as merchant vessels and mining ships. Admiral Kira studied the tactical data with professional interest. The human battle doctrine was unlike anything in Council military theory. Instead of massive ships and overwhelming firepower, they used speed, coordination, and precise strikes. Their fleets operated like surgical instruments rather than hammers. Look at these response times, she murmured to her staff. From first contact to total victory in 17 minutes. Their entire defensive network activated simultaneously, across 47 star systems. How is that possible? Her aide asked. Practice, Kira realized. They've been preparing for this scenario for decades. The implications were staggering. While the Council had viewed humans as peaceful merchants and diplomats, they had been quietly building one of the most effective military forces in the galaxy. But the military victory was only the beginning. As word spread that the pirate threat had been eliminated, something unexpected happened. Other species began requesting human assistance. The first plea came from the agricultural world of New Eden, where millions were still facing starvation from crop failures. Please, the planetary governor begged in his transmission to Earth. Our people are dying. We know you have efficient food distribution systems. Within hours, human relief ships were en route, not warships this time, but the same quiet merchants and logistics specialists who had been working in council space for decades. Similar requests followed from across the galaxy. Worlds with failing infrastructure, trade routes disrupted by them, recent chaos, communication breakdowns that threatened to spark new wars. The problems that the Council was struggling to handle were exactly the ones humans had been solving quietly for 50 years. President Da-Hoon found himself in the unexpected position of receiving diplomatic requests from the same council that had tried to steal human colonies just months earlier. The formal apology came from Councillor Vex himself, delivered in person to the human embassy on the neutral world of Haven Station. "We were wrong," Vex said simply, his usual pompous demeanor replaced by genuine humility. "We thought strength meant having the biggest fleets and controlling the most territory. We didn't understand that real strength is making civilization work." Ambassador Hyun-woo studied the Altarian leader across the negotiating table. "And what exactly are you proposing?" "Partnership," Vex replied. "Real partnership, not humans, serving in our shadow but as equals in governing galactic civilization. The territorial disputes? Resolved in your favor. Your colonies are recognized as sovereign human territory. And council representation?" Vex took a deep breath. "We're proposing something unprecedented. Humanity would join the council not as junior members but as co-leaders. Your people would have veto power over major decisions." Hyun-woo leaned back in his chair. After months of being dismissed and ignored, the turnaround was almost surreal. "Why now?" "Because," Vex said with painful honesty, "we've learned that we can't run galactic civilization without you. These past months have shown us what happens when the people who actually make things work decide to stop working. The negotiations took weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Council needed humanity more than humanity needed the Council. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about taking essential people for granted. When the agreement was finally signed, it marked the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. Humans would no longer be the invisible workforce keeping civilization running. They would be recognized as the indispensable partners they had always been, and in the Outer Rim, on worlds like New Busan, where human farmers still tended crops. Under alien suns, children played in gardens that their parents had carved from barren rock, secure in the knowledge that their homes would never be threatened again. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity. Not because humans were the strongest or the most numerous, but because they were the ones who understood that real power came from making things work, not just making things break. The crisis reached its peak when the Hive Queen Collective declared war on the Scythian Republic over a translation error. In the emergency council session, chaos reigned as dozens of species tried to communicate through failing translation systems. What should have been a simple misunderstanding about mining rights had escalated into accusations of genocide. The Scythians called us egg crushers. Queen Zara buzzed furiously, her insect wings vibrating with rage. "This is the gravest insult possible." "We said efficient harvesters," protested General Sarn, his reptilian scales flashing red with anger. "Your translators are malfunctioning." Councillor Vex looked desperately at his translation console. Error. Messages flashed across the screen in 17 different languages. The sophisticated AI systems that had seamlessly converted meaning between species for decades were breaking down without constant human maintenance. "Can someone please fix these systems?" Vex pleaded. "We've tried," his aide whispered. "The human programmers wrote the code in Earth languages. Our best technicians can't even read the comments." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The agricultural world of New Eden had suffered complete crop failure when its weather control systems malfunctioned. Millions were facing starvation, but the complex delivery networks that would normally respond were in chaos. On the manufacturing world of Titan 7, the automated factories had shut down entirely. The precision robots that built everything from communicators to life support systems required constant recalibration that only human technicians understood. Admiral Kira watched her fleet status board with growing despair. Half her ships were stranded in port with maintenance issues. The other half were scattered across the galaxy, fighting fires that seemed to spring up faster than they could be contained. "Ma'am, we're receiving reports of a full-scale pirate invasion in the Outer Rim," her communications officer announced. "Captain Razor has united 12 different raider clans. They're calling themselves the Free Fleet and claiming independence from Council space." Kira closed her eyes. The Outer Rim contained 47 inhabited systems and countless mining operations. It was also where most of the human colonies were located. "What about the human settlements there?" "No word, ma'am. They've gone completely dark." Unknown to the Council, the humans in the Outer Rim were facing their own crisis. In the colony of New Busan, Governor Minsu watched the pirate fleets approaching on his tactical display. "How long until they reach us?" he asked his defense coordinator. 6 hours, replied Colonel Sujin. "Their scouts are already jamming our communications." New Busan was typical of human colonies, small, efficient, and largely self-sufficient. Unlike the massive council worlds with their billions of inhabitants, it housed only 50,000 people. But those people had turned a barren world into a garden through decades of hard work. "The orbital defense platforms are online," Sujin reported. "But we're just one colony. There are 46 others in this sector." Minsu nodded grimly. The human colonies had always relied on mutual support and quick response fleets to deter pirates. Individually, they were vulnerable. Together, they were formidable. "Send word to all colonies," he ordered. "Implement Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was something the humans had hoped never to use. It was their contingency plan for total war. Across the Outer Rim, human colonies began powering up weapon systems that the Council had never known existed. Manufacturing centers that produced farming equipment quickly retooled to build military hardware. Merchant ships activated hidden armor and weapon pods. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's peaceful nature was a choice, not a weakness. As news of the approaching crisis reached Earth, President Dahun convened an emergency cabinet meeting. The holographic displays showed the chaos spreading across Council space, the approaching pirate fleets, and the desperate situation of their isolated colonies. "The Council is finally understanding what they've lost," reported Foreign Minister Yoon Jung. "They're sending daily requests for emergency assistance." "What about our people in the Outer Rim?" Dahun asked. "Cut off and surrounded. Defense," Secretary Wanho replied. "But they're not helpless. Our contingency preparations are coming online." Dahun stood and walked to the window overlooking Seoul. The city lights reflected his troubled expression. "How many will die before this is over?" "That depends," Wanho said quietly, "on whether the Council is finally ready to listen."